a lot of positive feedback. You buy into a project like that. It's incredible what's going on around the country, and that's a heck of a streak. In 1 year, they opened 10 ballparks in 1 year. Opened 3 last year, this year. There's 3 being constructed right now, so the streak will go on. They'll open 3 more in April of 2020, unless one of them's late. Then they'll easily have one in 2021, but I don't know who else is building at this point, so it's gonna happen. So what I want to do, and I'm gonna do in the next couple of weeks, is set up a peer-to-peer, an invitation for a peer-to-peer conversation with a city administrator in another city, with a city engineer in another city, with council members and mayor to mayor, and learn from their experiences. You know, how did your community succeed in doing this? What are the results that you're experiencing? And I think that more so than, like, you're probably tired of hearing me talk about it. So let's get online, with some city leadership in other towns, and let's talk to them about it. So I'm gonna be sending out invitations in the next couple of weeks. I'm just gonna put who's on deck, what time, here's the login number, sit and have a facilitated conversation about how this other city worked through this and how they made it into a big success. So I'm hoping you'll have the time and the interest in doing that. I certainly do. I'm gonna do it, and I'm hoping you guys will participate. I'll try to make it as easy as possible. I won't be flying you to Greensboro. I'll just put up a conference call number, and you can log in for a half hour and meet somebody who sits in a chair very similar to yours in another city that has a thriving downtown where they did not once have a thriving downtown. And we'll learn how to get from A to Z through their sharing their experience.
I just feel like we're already moving toward a thriving downtown. I mean, we need more, but there's $60 million going into our downtown right now. And that it's bringing investment and bringing businesses, and the tide is turning. I mean, I understand in 2012, there was absolutely nothing going on. So but it's a different environment now. If the school system and Barbara Ingham and Maryland Theater, all these things are happening that are bringing this here, are we focusing our attention on the wrong area? And this particular location that has been pushed for so long is now, there's a county building, there's so much that's already there that we would have to buy, and those people aren't even at the table. So I guess it's strange to me that we would be studying a location and we're saying we're gonna buy up all of these properties and those people aren't at the table. And that just doesn't seem like good business to me. Where's that money coming from, and are they even willing?
So is your concern, forget the money for now, just forget it for now. Is your concern doing this project or a project or anything? Because, a former boss would say you're either moving forward or backward or not standing still. And so one thing is building on the momentum. I mean, true, we have Barbara Ingham School, Maryland Theater, limited folks coming in. I mean, this, if we're looking at a complex that we're talking about generally speaking, you enhance and enlarge the stakeholders and the folks who'll be visiting, for example. So
I think the project is a great idea. I just want to make sure it happens this time. And so I don't know the best location for it. I think we should have a conversation. I think we all have different ideas there. We have to go about it the right way. And like I said, I'm not opposed to the project at all. I think we all know we need a new baseball stadium. They can't continue to play there. But I think that the Hagerstown Suns need to be involved in that conversation. And if we're looking at taking that county building and a car wash and a laundromat and all this stuff, that's a conversation we need to have with them as well. And like I said, I just don't, I don't know if we can gain the community support for that exact location with everything else going on.
My understanding is the next step would be to do that investigation, is to invest the money that the state's provided us. That's my understanding, I might be wrong, that there's no commitment. You know, if you do that, we have the money. The analogy I use, maybe it's a good or bad analogy, it's online dating. You're going on a date and someone else paid for dinner. And guess what? You don't like each other, so you go your separate ways. And so my understanding is the next phase is to take the next step without having to say, we're gonna pick a site, you know, to gather the information, from stakeholders, from the community. So that's my understanding. Again, I might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in just real quick here, because I just received this email from Randall Simpson, who was WLR, and we know that. Hey, Bob, Chad and I greatly appreciated the time you and Dan gave us this morning in outlining your vision for the new downtown stadium. As you are aware, we have made a large investment into the downtown area over the last 5 to 6 years. In addition to the auto spa, we have 75 residential rental units, along with a dozen commercial spaces. WLR Automotive Group is more than willing to work with Hagerstown in making the new stadium a reality. Since our location on 32 West Baltimore Street is vital in making this deal happen, I will commit to working through the details of relocating our car washes somewhere else in the Hagerstown area. It is very rewarding to work with visionaries like you and Dan. Hagerstown will look back at this project 10 years from now and be proud of the economic growth that it ended up creating. Thanks, Randall S. Simpson, President and CEO, WLR Automotive Group. You know, I hear things like, you know, we have to buy the county building, and I look back at the Urban Partners plan, and the plan calls for residential in the area where the current county permit building is. And I have to wonder, when that plan was put together, did we go to the county as a city and say, listen, we're going to put residential over here. Are you guys okay with us doing that? Are you going to give us that building? Are you going to sell it to us, or what are you going to do? I'm pretty sure the people that I've talked to said that conversation never happened. So, yeah, will something have to happen there if that site is chosen? Sure it will. Of course it will. You know, yeah, I mean, in 2012, the guy in the laundromat was, you know, more than willing to sell. Don't know if the guy who owns it now is or not. I have no idea. We haven't got to that point yet. In 2012, the Herald Mail was more than willing to give up parking area for this project. You know, so I don't, you know, I think we have a cart before the horse scenario where we're trying to figure out everything when we haven't done a phase 2 that says yes or no, a facility can even go there.
But we've done a phase 2 before. We know what phase 2 is gonna say. I just don't,
Well, hopefully phase 2 says something different this time, and hopefully it's much more
I just wonder what's
advantageous to the city of Hagerstown.
what's different this time? This is where I keep going back to. What is different this time? So how do we ensure that this time doesn't end up like all the other times? And in that location as well, we have a cultural trail that is bond financed and has 19 years left on bond financing. So we can't rip it up. I mean, that's gonna cause even more issues. Those are conversations that we should be having, and we're not. So what are we, I know you've said we can incorporate the cultural trail, but looking at the plans, it doesn't look that way. So we just spent $1 million to rip it back up.
The plan is from 2012, there wasn't a cultural trail there in 2012. That wasn't even thought of in 2012. So, yeah, there would have to be a new design to make it all work. But once again, cart before the horse, we aren't even to that point yet to make a decision whether we want to do something of that magnitude or not.
And I travel for minor league baseball, and I have for years, and when you go into another city and go to their ballpark, it is the crowning jewel in the city. Beautifully appointed, well-landscaped plazas, well-lighted, beautiful ingress. It's the pride of the community. And then go look at ours now. It does not present very well at all. So to me, the cultural trail is an asset. I think the study said it was an opportunity. Think about the visitor experience, the visitor impression. They park in the A&E district parking deck or the university deck and take the cultural trail to the stadium gate. And when they go home, what are they gonna say about Hagerstown? Wow, does that place have its act together? It was beautiful. You should see all the public art, all the cool lighting. So yeah, the cultural trail, think Utah Street, the warehouse at Camden Yards. It's an asset. Give an architect a 40-acre grassy field, and you'll get a cookie-cutter ballpark. It'll have no character. Give them a tight spot. Give them a challenging site, and what you'll get is a massive dose of innovation, where the ballpark is such a cool feature, people come to see it even when it's not game day. Because, hey, I'm that close, I gotta see this ballpark. Everybody's talking about it. You wanna expose people to the arts and to the art museum and to our beautiful city park. Put 250,000 people through that ballpark on a trail that leads them for less than a half a mile to all these other amenities. So I see it as a really positive asset. In Fort Wayne, the concourse of the ballpark is 360 degrees, and it's part of a downtown walking and hiking trail. And when you leave your office at lunchtime to, put in a mile, get your steps, you walk right through the ballpark, down to the end and come back. It's very seamless. It's considered a public park. So yeah, I'm excited that the cultural trail is there, and I think it's gonna make the whole visitor experience just that much better.
Jim,
Okay.
you had mentioned the opportunity zones, and of course, all three of the sites that were chosen by the MSA are in the opportunity zones,
Correct.
if I'm not mistaken. Do you think that if we didn't put a stadium there and we chose another location, just, let's say, do you think that, we have incentives, there's opportunity zones, do you think that businesses and development would still be happening even without a project like this?
Well, I think things happen, but you've had the opportunity zones for the last 2 years. So
Okay.
what's generated it over here? I mean, you need something that really grabs the attention of investor who's running opportunity zone fund somewhere else, doesn't know anything about our area, but he's looking and says, what's drawing my attention to look at Hagerstown, Maryland when I live in Florida and want to put my money somewhere? Well, you start building the momentum around a project like this, it's going to gather national attention. There's a lot of different baseball periodicals that are out there that are submitting it. It gives you that edge to pull those people in. And the thing is, you don't have them coming in here right now. Those 3 sites have been there for a while. You have to reach a critical mass to generate that kind of interest. And we're moving forward, and I think it's great what we're doing now. I would say back in 2012, there was more going on than nothing. I mean, that was coming after the end of my term as commissioner, but we had a variety of different projects. The USMH had finished, that was kind of getting going. There was some development that followed that. There's been a continuous set of big projects downtown that are slowly building us up to where we're going to reach that critical mass, where it is going to bring in a lot more, I feel. Back, one of the first things I did when I came to this job is, with our group, we looked at a Brookings Institute study that looked at, I forget how many it was like 40 different cities that had revitalized, that had really turned things around. And they tried to say, here's the 10 or 15 steps to be successful and do that. One of those steps talks about the need to focus in a smaller area. You can't dilute your investments all around, because if they're not in a targeted, focused area, you're not going to get over that hump. The other thing it talked about is how, when a downtown revitalized, there might have only been 30% public investment out of that 100% that happened over 10 or 15 years, but all that came in the first 3 or 4 years. They had to pump a lot of money into it early, and then they hit the mark where the private investment followed. When you look at the 10-year span, it was a nice ratio to say public to private and how we brought this up, but the public had to be the pioneer and step in early. I believe it was the Rockville mayor who talked to us at Mako. It was the same thing down there. They put in some huge amounts of money, to bring in some big back at the time retail was growing, but they brought in the Gap and some other places in Rockville, and he put a huge amount of incentives and cash incentives that brought those anchors in. Once they got to that point, Rockville took off. They had a lot of crime, they had a lot of other issues. It's not that way today. So, our thought is, and you guys gotta make decisions on where that site is, but our thought, from my perspective, is you need to focus the resources where you're already going. You have USMH, which is around the corner, we did that. You followed it up with the Maryland Theater, Barbara Ingram School, we're doing that. We have Mark going up the street a little bit with USMH, we're doing that. Naturally, what's the next step? It should be in that area. Focus it in that area. Will we support something in another place? Absolutely. Will we try to help out? We're here to make this community better, whatever that means. So, but, if you're asking my advice, based on what we looked at, you focus your incentives down into a focused area. You do block by block. It happened in Federal Hill, around Baltimore, in the Orioles Stadium. It's happened everywhere you go. You take a block, you get it going, you go to the block beside it. You get it going, you go to the block beside it. As far as having some private investment in different areas, you do, and that's great, and we need to, celebrate that. But, from me talking to some of my members that have different projects or things, they see this as a real game changer in the market where they're gonna escalate their investment in their properties, or they can move things forward. It's gonna happen. If that goes to another site, that doesn't mean that won't happen, but it may not happen next year. It may be a 10-year plan instead of a 2-year plan. What we're hoping to do here over the next several weeks is try to identify those people, those possible investors, and ask them, what would this mean to you? What does this directly mean to your plans for investment, so that you guys can kind of have that information as you're making a decision on what to do to move forward. We know if we go here, this is the projects that feel that they're going to be able to be successful because the market you created is enough to make it successful. Barnwood Books is sitting on the corner. That's been there. There's no plan for that. Yet Artopia, has been now for, 4 years. There's no buyers for that yet. The residential development along that part, which is a big part that we were hoping, I think the trail would spur. There's no buyer for that yet. So we need to pump in more.
Luke?
I have a different perspective, I think, than maybe some of the other council members. First of all, some of us are old enough to remember the phrase, when you got up and left the 25-cent movie, when you would say, this is where I came in. Okay, for those who don't know, you used to go to the theater and you'd buy your ticket and you'd go in no matter where the movie was, whether it was in the middle of the movie, and some movies, the horror movies, wouldn't allow you to enter in the last 5 minutes of the movie, so you couldn't see the ending. And I feel the same way. I sort of want to say, when we get to where I came in, please let me know, okay? And I don't say that sarcastically. I do have some comments about this. Unlike others on the council, I agree with the location. I did go through this 7 years ago. And you talk about not having to fly Austin to North Carolina. The mayor flew to Phoenix, and I've often said with people who think that was a joyride, he flew out on one day and flew home the next day. No joyride was it. I did everything in the end except make a total jackass out of myself with our $15 million anonymous donor who didn't want to be identified, but who we wined and dined and went to the bankers with and everything else until we found out that was just something that we never figured out. Meaning I was a strong supporter of that. We went through the studies. I mean, Ripken's study sitting there, I understand that this is a study that has to be done in order to get the right financing. I have no problems with that. I have no problems with anything. And I totally agree with what you all are saying about downtown improvement. I mean, candidly, this is the same argument about location that we had with the University of Maryland, with a great amount of people arguing it needed to be out at HCC. And I can tell you 2 city council members felt that way. I'm not going to name names, but I was called on Thanksgiving weekend over to a councilman's House to be the third councilman to sign a letter to the governor saying we wanted it at HCC, and I said, are you nuts? Because they thought, for the university, they thought it would be better at HCC. And I never argued that. I never argued that for the university it may be better at HCC. But for Hagerstown, it was better downtown. I have little doubt in my mind that a stadium right off the interstate in various locations that many people have identified would be a much better stadium for the Suns. Probably get easier to draw, do a whole lot of things. But if you're gonna put it out there, don't ask me to give any money for it, because it's not gonna do anything for Hagerstown. It's just gonna do something for a baseball team. It may help the county out, and then they need to fund it. And I totally agree with what you're saying. You put a baseball stadium that close to downtown, that close to our park, that close to the museum, and I agree with what you're saying, Dan. You architecture it correctly, and it would be beautiful. But that leads me to where I came in. And that is, until you can get, Paul, I mean, we've been told over and over again by anybody who will speak from the state, and appropriately so, that the funding paradigm for a stadium in the state of Maryland is a third state, a third local, and a third private. 7 years ago, we had the state committed, we had the county committed, we had the city committed, we had a $15 million phantom donation, we had people in Phoenix who acted like they were interested in doing something other than getting paid. We had other groups come in and spend hours with us under the premise that they were gonna come in with the financing, and their financing was give us the money and we'll run it for you. We had every developer in the world saying just what I'm hearing. You build this stadium, baby, and we have it right now. It's already been in the paper. If this stadium got built on that site, there is little doubt in my mind that Dagmar would eventually turn into a boutique hotel. How much money is it worth to have the Dagmar become a boutique hotel? A lot, but not $15 million. And of course, in my opinion, that's minimally the third local cost, which the city would not bear all that, okay? But we need private investment to come in with that third. 7 years ago, it wasn't that we couldn't get the 15 million, we couldn't get a nickel. I mean, we couldn't get 5 cents. We couldn't get one private investor to even mention an interest. The Maryland Theater. I do not believe the Maryland Theater would ever be where it is right now if it weren't for the Hamiltons. It wasn't private money that kicked that Maryland Theater off, it was private investment. It was the grant from the Hamilton Foundation. And suddenly other people started jumping on. And then you got governments involved. Now, one thing is for sure, there's little doubt in my mind that every time we even mention talking about a new stadium, the value of the Hagerstown Suns increases in value. There's no doubt in my mind that if we broke ground on a new stadium, that the value of the Hagerstown Suns would go up exponentially.
Pass that down to Lou for me, will you? Just so he sees it. You know, when you say that there was no private investment in 2012, and regardless of the $15 million mystery man or not, we had a commitment from the owner, which is private investment, of $6 million. So there is private investment in this project.
That was, listen, I don't want to get in a debate, Bob, about that whole issue, but that also involved, let's be clear on this, nobody is given money without naming rights. Mm-hmm. And that investment involving naming rights. And those naming rights would have been sold by Bruce Quinn to someone else. So we could have sold naming rights. I understand what you're saying, and I really
I was
think-
talking about the lease, I wasn't talking about naming
Well,
rights. Because there's different ways to go about funding
I-
this,
I-
which is another thing that can be shown.
I'm an
of
absolute.
phase two.
Bob, listen, I was a proponent of this project.
I know you
You
were.
know that.
I know.
You know, matter of fact,
Five-
not only
five
was I a
council members
proponent,
were.
but I was
So,
a
yeah.
large proponent, and you know the reason I was. The same reason I am today, for downtown renovation, and that's why I agree with this particular site. However, you know, and I have no problem with phase two at all. The only problem I have at this stage of the game is a problem with the city putting money into it. I commend our delegate for doing this. And I think if it's short a insignificant degree, that we need to be looking at our private partners and our county partners. Am I saying I would never put any money into that additional? I don't know. I'll never say never, but I'll say never if we're the only other funding source other than the state. Because that's just, to me, another indication that we, you know, candidly, I'd like to see stakeholders as people willing to put some money in, and there are some people at this table who are willing to do that. So I don't mean to imply that there are not, okay? But so I express to you my support and my concern that I don't know. And when we talk about the other stadiums, I want to point out Frank Perdue, Cal Ripken, they all were funded that way. I don't know how Potomac got funded. Does anybody know where the private money came from down there?
For Fredericksburg's, the move to
Oh,
Fredericksburg?
I'm sorry, I really wasn't aware that they moved. Okay,
Well, they are, I mean, Fredericksburg they're building a stadium in Fredericksburg. for
Okay, they're the
Potomac
ones doing
Nationals.
the long-term lease, right? He's
They're-
fronting the money, or how
Yeah,
it's worded.
the city's giving them $1 million
Right,
something, yeah,
right.
a year.
So that's my feelings about it.
Gotcha.
Can I address that, one-third private sector? So that is the rule of thumb. It's not statute. It's what a lot of communities target.
Senator Serafini made it clear that that was
Yeah.
how he saw it.
And the Stadium Authority wants that. I mean, that's what they're telling me. But I've chronicled the last 22 ballparks built, and how much they cost, and what was the private share, what was the public share, and how was the public share funded? And it is all over the map. So every town does it the way it best suits them. Before a lease is negotiated, it's hard to talk about figures, because that is a real indication of what your target is. But the private sector money doesn't come from donations or investments in the ballpark. It comes from a 30-year lease, which transfers from owner to owner. So I've lived through about 5 ownership groups since I moved to Hagerstown and became a Suns fan. So who owns the team is insignificant to me. The fact that they have a 30-year lease tied to this new facility is our goal. Now you take that lease money and a portion of the naming rights, and over a period of 30 years, that becomes 1/3 of the project cost. Exactly. So how does the local business community support the ballpark? They rent the luxury suites. They buy advertising on the outfield wall. They buy a block of season tickets for their staff and to entertain their clients. That's how the business community supports the ballpark. The third, private sector, is fully from the lease and a portion in the naming rights. So I'm doing a little survey around minor leagues right now. What could you get for naming rights in the Hagerstown market? All right, 300 to 500,000 annually is what I'm being told, and I didn't believe it. If you want 500,000, then you got to give a lot. Luxury suite, certain amount of tickets, exclusive naming rights. If you want 300,000, all those other revenue sources are available to split with the ownership or to have with the city. I never thought it would be that high, and I mean, my sample size is like that big, so I'm still working on that. But I'm encouraged that we could at least pull 100,000 a year out of a naming rights deal to go to a debt service, and the ownership group makes up the rest.
When you're doing this, Dan, could you also try to see what interest there would be in the business community to season tickets, to Scott Suites, things of that nature? I mean, I'd be very, those are the kind of things that would be helpful to me, to hear that not only these things that could be done, but we have businesses that are saying, if you built that stadium, we would do it. I'm not asking people to sign a contract committing to it, but I am interested to hear from those folks, whether it be, you know, Citicorp or Volvo, or whoever it would be, of an interest.
So, the advice I'm getting on naming rights is you go with a national company that has a regional presence. Don't go to a local company, they can't afford that. BB&T Bank, Columbia Gas, First Data. So no, I haven't probed into that yet.
No, I understand.
Who's gonna raise their hand and buy, we're gonna build 6 suites, not 16.
Right.
You know, and a block of season tickets, those are the types of things we could start rallying people behind now. We were focusing more on the collateral investment. Because what we've targeted, at $53 million in new investment and new property assessment, it'll offset the city's cost for the debt service. But my goal for the city and the county would be to pay for this debt service outside of property taxes. Because that's the thing that municipal and county governments covet the most. Don't give it away on a TIF district. Keep it for yourself. So you shift the debt service off to amusement taxes, lodging taxes, and things like that, so that when the property assessments come rising up, money floods into the city's coffers and the county coffers to pay police and fire and rescue service and provide social services and rec and parks and make investments in the communities, goodwill the other way. That's kind of my personal goal for the funding model. I think we can achieve that because we have a really robust lodging industry here, and that's a strong fund, and this city-county third of a share, financed over 30 years, is not gonna be prohibitively large. It's a rather small amount in the scheme of a $240 million annual budget. It's a very small thing in the scheme of a state budget. So yeah, that's kind of my vision for that. I just want the city and the county to benefit in their general fund from this, and not to give that away to offset the debt service. Because then you're like, oh, look what we accomplished, we're still broke. So,
I think there's one more thing I just want to bring up. When you're looking at the state third, we got to think about how do we improve our chances of getting that? It's going to be, that's, anytime you're going for state money, it's competitive. And, we do not have the political clout of Central Maryland, so we have to really work hard at it. Last time, I can just tell you what happened last time. Last time, one of the ways we won was because this was designated a downtown revitalization project. So we made a big issue over that. When I was commissioner, we downzoned the rural areas, took a big hit, that's not an easy thing to do politically. The Secretary of State, Rich Hall at the time, who was Secretary of Planning for the town, I contacted Rich Hall and said, Rich, we downzoned the county, we did what you wanted to do to try to help, drive growth to the urban areas, but you're gonna have to support us building infrastructure in the urban areas to try to take care of that growth. You gotta support the counties that actually bit the bullet and made those decisions and made that happen. He was a big proponent of what we were trying to do because it was down in the core, and he talked to the capital budget senior person for Governor O'Malley at the time, who was right across the hall, to say, hey, what these guys are doing downtown's important. We gotta get behind this project. We gotta give you state funding. That's what helped us get that state $10 million. And if you talk to some of the delegates back then, or senators, they'll tell you that money was had. Now, people need to understand how that works in the capital budget. You go and ask in the summer. I think in September, it was Mayor Brucci, the former head of the Chamber of Commerce, Jill Frick, and the coalition's lobbyist. All went down. We met with the senior person for capital budget. We made our plea. They used September, October to kind of sort out and who rises to the top. November, December, they start kicking around internally, throwing in the political aspects to this, say which county you want to give more money to, whatever, and they make decisions and kind of tell you that behind the scenes. It's not something they take headlines out on and say, hey, we're giving you the money, because they reserve the right to change anything up until that capital budget comes out in January. We had all the right feedback then, but then we had some changes in decisions on whether or not to move forward, and then the comments we got was, hey, we're pulling that back. Obviously, you guys are still thinking about this project. We're pulling that away this year. Talk to us again, and we'd have to restart the process next year. So as you're moving forward to make a decision on which project or which area you want to go, think about that, because that is a third of the money, and Maryland is one of the few states that actually writes a check for sports stadiums. So, will they support it other places? Possibly. I don't want to say they wouldn't. We certainly could make an effort, but that was the part that pushed us over the hill, that got a Democratic governor in a Republican county, and I'm not saying for politics, I'm saying for votes. I don't know how many votes he got in Washington County, but it was probably, 20%, 25% versus the other way. So that's not easy politically to walk down for that, but we were able to win that because of a downtown revitalization project. The chair of appropriations is Delegate McIntosh. She's out of Baltimore. She has keen knowledge of what stadiums do to cores. That helped us, and she will most likely be chair of appropriations again this year. So those are things to consider, as you're making that decision, is what's going to give us the best chance of getting their money. So just put that out there as well.
So, one of the things that occurred back in 2012 when a number of us took office after that election, and that initial stadium proposal sort of fizzled out, was each of us were given sort of all of the documentation that folks weren't given to a large degree during those deliberations. And at that time, I said two things during that election process. One was, I'm not really pro or anti-baseball. I don't have any great affinity or opposition to the sport or to having the amenity. And two, we had spent about the last 10 years investing more than $60 million into the arts and entertainment and education themes for downtown, and we were starting to reap some of the fruits of that investment, and I felt that that was the appropriate theme and course to continue for the city, and those were sort of very two simple points that I made in that election process. And so sometime before we were actually sort of sworn into office, we were given sort of all the information, and at that point you're able to digest the communications and dialogue and facts and figures that had occurred, and we talk about this needs to be more than just for baseball. And so in part of that, those lease agreement outlines, things stuck out to me, such as the city gets to use all or part of the music free of charge for 10 events per year and gets to keep the proceeds, and those events have to be one-day events between March 1st and September 30th, and otherwise the events are managed through the Suns. They have a surcharge on tickets. 10 of the 12 private suites would be owned and retained for the sole use and proprietorship of the Suns. All of this 100 or 75 or 125 parking spaces, VIP spaces, would be owned and retained and marketed at the sole discretion of the Suns. And so you go through, and there's about 30 items here, a few of which I would say favor the initiative of the city being the debt burden holder of that. And it was actually a 20-year lease term with possibility of renewal, not a 30. One of the other documents that we received at that time were the negotiations for acquisition of property. And I know the mayor mentioned the laundromat at that time. The offer was about $365,000. The owner wanted about $600,000. The offer for the Herald Mail property was about $1.2 million. And the Herald Mail's response was they're going to get their own appraisal. And so I hear these notions that these things are sort of, ironed out, and you read a different story when you actually get to read the documentation. And that's really our job up here. It's certainly not the public's to digest this information and sort of make informed decisions. It's really ours to do. One of the things that we also received well after the project and the election had, ran its course, was about 6 months into the term. We received the Phase 2 environmental report for the property. And, fortunately, working in the public sector, I get to see some of these things from time to time. And so Jim probably recalls when, we were commissioners and asked to entertain the thought and possibility of buying a property in Williamsport that we had some environmental concerns about. And, when you read a report, the groundwater report, so what they did is they dug 24 test holes of the property that we're talking about, the Baltimore Street, and, there are 24, 25 different contaminants found, and you see diesel components and the MDE standard's about 47 parts per million, I believe it is. And you read that this site, one of the groundwater test locations was 45,000 parts per million. And those types of things, obviously, in concert of the total package of the property acquisition, the environmental conditions, the terms with the prospective tenant, and I won't go into some of the funding outlines that were included. They give you some pause and some cause for concern, and it did, and that's just an analysis that I would do within my own mind as part of any deliberation of any item or activity or project I'm being asked to consider on behalf of the public. And sometime shortly thereafter, late 2013, we had the same entity come back and sort of do we'll call it a re-report with further considerations. And I believe at that time, Hospital Hill, as it's commonly referred to, was sort of on the table, and lo and behold, at the end of that process, that became, for a very short moment, the area of consideration. And part of that study, and this gets to the point that I have, part of that study outlined a stadium adjacent to the existing stadium location. And it was a small part of that 2013 report by Ripken Design again. And some of the things within that additional report caught my eye, and this is one of those areas. And so I tried to take the new report that we received from Crossroads Consulting and the Populous Matrix, and I'm still not sure how those numbers were configured on the point scale. But I tried to take some of those items, just as I did in that last iteration back those number of years ago, and talk about property cost. 2012, the Baltimore Street property was at about $6.5 million of projected acquisition cost component. The area adjacent to the existing stadium is less than $1 million. And so right there for me, I have to look at that and say, okay, that's about a $5 to $6 million swing just on property acquisition cost alone. And a couple of other things associated with that property cost is in that time, there have been more than $5 million in public and private investment in the Baltimore Street property area between the car wash, the county, the Harold Mill building, and the Cultural Arts Trail. There's been zero investment in those properties adjacent to the current stadium site. Zero. And so the Second item associated with property cost and investment on location is for about $6 or $7 million, we get about a 6-acre site that we possibly can fit a stadium on based on a specific configuration that's different than the configuration of the other 7 locations looked at, versus for less than $1 million, we get more than 20 acres, I believe, in total of the property that's adjacent to the current stadium site. And that's simply because the city owns, about 70% of that total property. And so that was one thing. The second was obviously the environmental constraint. Like I said, when I see that, and I didn't see it added into the project cost scope, but when you're hitting groundwater at 6 and 12 and 18 feet, number one, and you're finding those levels of contaminants, and let's face it, you're putting it on a property that was an intensively used rail yard at one time, and it's now basically a big parking lot. And so I have to question, once you make that endeavor, what's the cost equation environmentally to address the conditions of that property? And the third item speaks to Lou's comment about county support. The property adjacent to the current stadium, I don't need to ask the county to figure out how they're going to up and move away from a $1.6 million investment in a current administration building that they have now, and move and find and expend that funding for relocation elsewhere. I think they bought that property for about $330,000, and they put about $840,000 into it by the time I left county office. The fourth item, as I mentioned, was just the sheer acreage. If you're telling me I get 20 acres to develop for this type of project versus 6, and I can do it at about 15% of the property acquisition cost, that's a big deal. The next item was the Urban Partners Plan. So there's 8 projects listed in the Urban Partners Plan, which we've been attempting to follow. None of those 8 projects include a stadium, but they do include 2 other things. One is a Class A office space, and the other is a convention facility. And I've taken some folks up, and I've shown some folks, and I will tell you, the possibility of putting some type of office complex on Hospital Hill that has that view down into a stadium, to me, is a fairly sort of visionary thing. And you really have to go up and see it to sort of understand that, and then to be able to provide that linkage to a place within that vicinity, because there's about, 100 acres worth of varying type of office and hospitality facilities. Venice comes to mind in that immediate vicinity, which gets me to the next point, and we talk about, the Dagmar is a boutique hotel. If we're doing this to fix the problems at the Dagmar, we could all probably save a lot of money and just buy and mothball the Dagmar. But we have other real problems, as you well know, of our hotels along the Dual Highway. And putting that stadium at that location immediately provides opportunity for an influx of patronage to boost the marketability of about 3 or 4 hotels along that stretch of the Dual Highway in the immediate vicinity, from the Days Inn up to the Venice Inn, and those areas in between. And we've certainly discussed at this table those problems that those hotels have posited. The other item that caught my interest, and what I'd like to do, I'm a visual person, you're free to pass these around. You can certainly throw them in the trash when we leave here. But it just gives you an idea, and I got kind of tired of hearing over the last several months, I'm simply opposed to a stadium, and I'm not opposed, on face value. I just have a different idea, about what that looks like. And I don't buy into this notion that downtown consists of simply 4 blocks of downtown. There's about 20 blocks in downtown that make up downtown that we have to achieve some sort of rounded investment in. And so it just gives you an idea. And the reason I pass this around is because it immediately provides about a 4-acre park amenity to a location such as that, without having to do much at all except add that park amenity to this type of venue, providing that opportunity for events other than baseball. The other thing it does is, everybody's heard about the MS4 mandate. We've got to fix our stormwater management structures, we've got to do retrofits, and we've also heard time and again about flooding issues at this area. Here we have the opportunity to use both stormwater management fees and federal tax credits to invest in retrofit of the creek, the culverted area along this stretch, and address that with funding that isn't general fund money. The next item, when I looked at the 2 sites, and frankly, half a dozen of those sites, there is no better site on that paper that we received for accessibility than this location. There are dualized roads, there are 2-way streets that go in and out of this. When I looked at the traffic assessment report for the Baltimore Street property, there was at least one intersection that would go to a level F, and at least a number of intersections on 1-way streets at times would be level D. And that's just with the vehicular activity back in 2012, before we did anything else downtown at that time for those periods. Now it's clearly a different picture. The other item that I looked at is, we talk about the opportunity for private business. I got an email from the owner of Stadium Tavern, and said, hey, this is going to have an impact if there's a different, direction. And I said, we could situate this in a manner that actually brings that business into the proximity of that type of facility and provides a natural sort of creek feature tied into that business and tied into the stadium. We also talked about the issue associated with residential homes. I will tell you a couple of things. This area is located within what we would generally call the Bester residential area. The Bester residential area, if you look at the city census tracts, you'll see 2 things. One is there's approximately 11 to 12% home ownership in what we call sort of the Bester census area tract. The second is there's about 75% subsidized housing for different types of housing in that same census tract. And there's over 400 residential properties in the vicinity of this particular location that could certainly stand that same level of economic benefit and build up the residential stability that some at this table have talked about. The other thing, it doesn't disrupt the efforts that we have made on the A&E. And so, while I couldn't get a map for it, I tried to figure out physically by looking at what the proposal was, because the proposal on the 8 sites and the final site design that we received for Baltimore Street, the stadium is configured differently. And so I didn't realize that until you look at the 2 differentiations between the report and what was proposed in the analysis. And so I just simply, you're welcome to pass this around, and you can see the overlay of what it means. Because you can see the Google Earth overview of where it's at, and you can see what the stadium will look like once it's superimposed on it. And that brings me to the question I think that Emily raised, which is we have, I'm going to probably speak out a little here, we have tax-exempt bond financing associated with the improvements and investments that we've made in the cultural trail to the tune of almost $2 million. And I don't know the ramifications of what that means of removing that from what has been invested there as it applies to the remaining term that we have on those bonds, and whether we would have to go to a taxable bond structure, because now we are entering into it with a private party. I've done that on at least one other occasion with another jurisdiction, and I'm familiar that would likely be a very possible outcome. And I don't know what the financial ramifications of that mean. And the last thing I'll say, and, you know, this is probably a little bit of, I don't know, I'll call it the con, you know, I just gave you the pros of why I've sort of reached where I'm at, but I'll give you the con is, you know, what do you do with the light department? Because this would obviously have an impact, but two good things from that. One is, that's an impact to a city departmental function, which means we don't have to ask another governmental entity to be impacted by the decision we make. We have talked, I think, at length through this administration as well as a prior administration of the possibility of looking at consolidated city services in sort of a central maintenance facility. And notably, we've talked about that at a place like the old paper recycling plant. And to me, that's a very viable use of relocation that not only ties in to a project like this at that location with that amount of acreage, but also then ties into the efforts that we made with the removal of MLP and restoration of the creek there, and provides those parking amenities at a much less cost for that type of amenity feature than it would elsewhere on a more constricted site. And so, you know, I certainly haven't sat through these deliberations the number of times that Lou has, but we've had consultant after consultant say, it should be out on 81, it should be over on Basil Boulevard, it should be on Baltimore Street, it should be, you know, where the stadium is now. And I've just had to sit and look and say, okay, if we want to keep it in town, if we want to keep the cost down, you know, if we want to provide those amenities, and we want to do it in a manner that ties in to redevelopment opportunity, and provides accessibility and, you know, all those sort of check the boxes types of things that we've talked about through every iteration of every location that we've discussed, and we say, you know, it must be done in a manner that benefits the city. For me, this is the site. And it's not that I think that all, you know, all those other sites are untenable. It just means for me that after having the opportunity to evaluate all of the information, this is the one that makes sense in my mind. I think it's more publicly supportable. I think it's more politically palatable to the various parties, and I think that it provides equally the same level of economic impact to the city's urban area that other locations would. But if there are three that are interested in Baltimore Street, you know, or some other site, I understand the dynamics, the way this five-person body works. You're more than welcome to pursue that location and you know, do so at the will of the majority.
Well, I think Councilman Alshire brings up a good point, and along the lines of what Councilmember Keller said at the beginning, as far as the vision of the city and where we want to go as a city. And it seems from the discussion I've heard so far from most of the members here, it seems to be that there is support for a facility. The question really comes down to as far as potentially where that facility may be. I mean, Councilmember Ressler was very clear, and I appreciate his comments earlier. Councilmember Alshire was just as clear just a moment ago. But I think what we all have to look at in the conversation that Councilmember Keller started out with is, what's the vision? And where do we want to see ourselves 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? And you can make an argument for any one of these sites one way or another. I'm not an expert in site analysis. You know, the Maryland Stadium Authority did their analysis, or Ripken City did their analysis. You know, we have downtown sites that have been identified for opportunity zones. There are a lot of individuals have gone in to indicate what zones are ripe for reinvestment and opportunities, whether it's the state, the federal government. You know, the governor's talked at length about opportunity zones. Congressman Trone was here last week and twice mentioned opportunity zones. You know, we can put a facility at any one of these 8 sites and you'll get something out of it. The question is, what is it that you want to get out of it? Do you want to have a facility where you drive up, you park, you go to a game, you leave, and you go to a hotel? You can have that facility at the current site, sure. Do you want a site downtown where you're going to force people to come out on the streets of Hagerstown? You're going to force 200, 300, 400,000, how many people it is to come to our core and walk through the core of downtown Hagerstown to spur that investment that we so desperately need. This is so much bigger than a stadium. We keep talking about stadium, but what it really comes down to, I think, Paul said this earlier, and Jim alluded to it, is the urban improvement project that we're currently on. Okay, we have the urban improvement project. what's gonna be next. Whether it's Urban Improvement Project 2.0, you wanna call it whatever it may be, but it's something that's gonna be a combination of public-private investment to continue the momentum downtown. Without that, we're gonna be sitting here like, Councilman Messner has been and Mayor Brucci for the last 20 years and talk about this for the next 10 or 20 years, We know what our downtown looks like without an urban improvement project opposed to what this could be. We know what that is. We're living it. The question is, do we want to see what the possibility is in the future of having something would have the magnitude to transcend everything that is going on here right now. I went back and looked at a few things, through the Herald Mail, and you can find a lot when you're reading this, and a lot of it goes when we're talking about site selection, location, things of that nature. And a couple of things I just want to point out here real quick from the articles I read here. I don't want to come downtown and leave there at night with all the weirdos. So leave it alone, put it out on I-70 where it belongs. I hope they don't put this downtown. Not once have I ever seen police, and I sure do wonder about the security in downtown Hagerstown. Hagerstown resident Roy Funk spoke out against taxpayers having little say in where their money is spent, including proposed downtown projects, the taxpayers not being represented. This is not about a stadium. It's not about an improvement project that we're talking about here now. This is what Councilman Messner alluded to earlier. This was about the university system in Maryland 20 years ago, okay? This is the same discussions that were had 20 years ago, the same discussions we're having now, but where the best place is to put a facility, the best place to put a project that can really help influx and change the trajectory of our town, going forward. Tim Rowland wrote an article at the same time. I remember it's Tim Rowland. His last sentence was 20 years from now, the governor's decision will be seen either as bold or creative, or crazy and pig-headed. Time will tell. So we're here 20 years now after the university system of Maryland. I don't think anyone at this table would argue that that was an incorrect decision. But you go back 20 years ago, the entire Washington County delegation was against putting that university downtown. All the stakeholders wanted it out at either Allegheny, the Allegheny property out on 70, or then to Hagerstown Community College there towards the end. It came downtown. You could argue without that, obviously you wouldn't have the university itself. Barbara Ingram may not be here. We definitely wouldn't have the urban improvement project that I have going on right now. And what's happened over the last 20 years, how downtown has changed from what it was then to what it is now, again, we know what our downtown looks like without having a project of this magnitude. So the decision is up to you guys as far as what the location. I mean, it sounds to me, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but from the discussion here, there seems to be a majority consensus of looking into the possibility of a project. It seems to maybe possibly be the location. So, I mean, again, that's a decision you guys have to make, but I would caution, being concerned about, where that location may be and then how it's going to transcend, over time. We've seen this movie, 20 years ago. And again, I don't think anyone would disagree with how that has worked out and where we are now. So, again, it's your guys' decision, but I go back to the original question that Councilmember Keller answered, and I haven't heard it completely from everyone though, of what your vision of downtown is. And whether you're gonna talk about this evening, that's fine, or next week, whenever you guys are gonna reconvene, because there's no pressure on this either. I don't think that we need to rush into this, like Councilman Keller said, as far as have to have a decision tonight by any means. When Maryland Stadium Authority was here, the money would be released for phase 2 in July. They even indicated they probably wouldn't start it till the fall. So when you talk about doing things, differently, so we don't fall back to the same way that we've done before, by all means, do your due diligence, that whatever you feel is needed. But, to sit here and talk about things at the same breath about what happened in 2012 and how, all these amenities were geared towards the team, well, this isn't 2012, this is 2019. All right, things are different. It's a different aspect of where the team situation is, there's a different aspect of where our community is. There's different people at this table here today. So I am more than happy to lend my support to whatever direction you guys decide to go in. Ultimately, it's your decision as far as moving forward as from a city initiative. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I appreciate you guys doing your due diligence with this project.
Anybody else at the table want to say anything?
I just want to go back to the current location and then what Kristen brought up. I mean, I don't think this is a horrible idea, and I think he raises some good points. And I talked to the deputy mayor of Fort Wayne, Indiana earlier today about their downtown stadium. I'm pretty sure you wrote the script for him to read, because he sounded an awful lot like you.
I've been repeating his words.
Yeah, but, you know, their downtown stadium is not downtown like the Baltimore Street location. It's about the same distance as this general area where it's at now. And he said that what happened there was the growth experience went from just being right downtown, like we're experiencing, the whole way to the ballpark. I mean, that to me is interesting when we're looking at what we want to do. Like, yes, we want a stadium, an event center, whatever we're going to call it. Do we put it right on Baltimore Street where things are already happening, or do we put it a little further away and have growth? Because Hagerstown is bigger than the square. I mean, we constantly talk about the square and what's happening in the Arts and Entertainment District, but it is, Hagerstown needs developed all over. And I think, yes, opportunity zones are extremely important, but does putting a location such as this, or, you know, even Hospital Hill, which I know is in the picture, but does that growth then go from just downtown Hagerstown the whole way? Because that's what they experience there. And that would be a good thing, in my opinion.
So what's happening in the Baltimore Street area now? I mean, you said that there's
I mean,
already
that's
stuff
very
happening
close
there.
to the urban improvement project.
But what's happening there?
What?
Nothing is happening at the Baltimore Street area is what I'm
Well,
saying.
there's businesses there now, and a
You have
county
a county
building.
office building that doesn't pay taxes. You have
Right, that
a
we
car
have to
wash
buy.
that I read you an email from. You
have
have
to buy.
properties across the street on Baltimore Street that pay a pilot. You have, I mean, there's the possibility of great things that could happen from Baltimore Street the whole way down Memorial Boulevard if you place one in that area. I mean, you know, you guys, the last administration talked about that. And, you know, again, the urban improvement or the urban partners plan, the 8-point plan that Kristen alluded to, a Class A office space was talked about. It was talked about on the Central, on the Elizabeth Hager lot. Wasn't talked about on Hospital Hill. There's residential along that cultural path that runs from Baltimore Street to Lee Street. All property that is not owned by the city of Hagerstown, that's owned by other entities. You know, but we built the cultural trail anyway. So I don't understand why, and I'm not saying that Kristen's plan is a bad plan. I'm not saying that at all. You know, but again, we don't even know, you know, what if we looked at that as phase 2? And we did a study on that as phase 2. What happens to HDLP? You know, what happens over there to the central maintenance garage? Where do they go? You know, do they go across the street to the green machine? You know, we got to buy that, we got to tear it down, we got to refab it, or whatever we got to do. What does that cost? So, you know, I mean, you heard from the business community, you heard from the people the stakeholders, who say, you know, this is a good spot on Baltimore, but again, it's up to you guys to make that decision. You 5 have to decide where you want to focus on and where you want to spend phase 2 money at.
Are we able to add Kristen's idea site to phase 2 in order to enact?
I'm sure it's going to double the price, but sure.
Well, then no.
Yeah, we're trying to bring phase 2 to a certain percentage of like drawings. I don't want to go through phase 2 and just have a glossy image that everyone gets inspired by. I want to have some legitimate engineering. I want to have some legitimate architectural, you know, space in it. I want that to be part of the design project, so we don't have to spend the money again. When I was prepping to interview for the job I have now, I went to see John Fiesler, who has my job in Frederick, and I asked him, what is Frederick's #1 tourist attraction? And I thought he was gonna say Monocacy Battlefield, or the religious sites up along Route 15. He said, it's the urban experience. I said, oh, you mean Carroll Creek? He said, no, it's the whole urban experience. That's what brings people out of Rockville and Bethesda up into Frederick for a night out. Frederick wishes it had its ballpark there on Carroll Creek. It's only a mile away. I agree with what Jim said earlier. don't dilute the investment. Go for a critical mass downtown, and as you advance through this battlefield of economic development, don't leave a pocket of enemies in your rear. Don't leave a rotting city core, and have a half of an East End project too. I just don't think the East End project is as sexy as the downtown project. And because of that, I don't think it'll do as well. And I don't think it'll fix all the things that we need to fix in our downtown core. And I don't think it'll create that urban experience that we're looking for. City parking garages are empty after 5 o'clock. When that ballpark is downtown, they'll be full after 5 o'clock. Think about how much revenue will flow into your parking fund because the ballpark's downtown. A lot of money coming in. Do you want to justify a third deck? You're gonna need it anyway. Do you want the full force and power of the stadium there, or do you want to build it independent of that and try to find a way to finance it, make it part of this bigger project? And I don't want to get too preachy, but we're gonna build a ballpark downtown, not because it's easy or cheap, but because it's hard, and because it's the right thing to do. $1 in, $2 out on the East End, or 10 in and 10 out downtown. I mean, I think it's all in on the downtown site. As tourism director, I'm gonna win either way. You could build this in Williamsport, and I would win. Build it in Hancock, my gosh, they could use a boost. But as a citizen and a taxpayer and a property owner in this city, I wanna see it downtown.
I think that, and I may be looking at this totally different than anybody else. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but
Oh, you're definitely a weirdo.
I know I'm a weirdo. I admit, I'm the first to admit. I
well, we
do
love it.
things, I fly upside down sometimes because I like it. We keep coming back to the baseball field, and yet everybody here tonight has spoken about this as a multi-use facility, an event center, a multi-use complex of some sort. My view of downtown Hagerstown is the best thing that we have going for us downtown right now is the influx of the university traffic. The educational institutions are coming in right now. You look at any other city anywhere in this country, when you've got an educational institution downtown, you've got continuous turnover. You've got parents coming in, you got students coming in, you got students going to dinner, parents taking students to dinner, constant influx, in and out, movement of people, and then everything builds up around there. And this downtown facility that's something that should be and can be part of this. I mean, the multi-use complex down there, I see it being an enabler for BISFA to have performances outside at night. I see the Maryland Symphony having Symphony Under the Stars at night. I see Shakespeare Under the Stars. There's all kinds of things that can happen in this downtown event center other than baseball. And everybody, we keep coming back to baseball diamond. I don't see that as being the big draw. I just don't. I think that what we're talking about here is a multi-use facility to get traffic downtown. And I think if we can, I mean, why wouldn't the educational institutions have their commencement ceremonies there? If we ever put the Blues Fest back on again, why wouldn't it be there? If we continue to do Imagine Hagerstown, why isn't that the place where we'd have it? This is just a spot to bring all this traffic downtown. If you never build a baseball diamond, I don't care. But let's put some kind of a catalyst downtown to bring that traffic. I don't care what kind of traffic it is. And that, again, maybe I'm weird looking at it that way, but that's my feeling. I think we need something downtown.
But I think that the partnership with the baseball team seems to add to the possibility. So it's both. The way am I correct?
So minor league baseball is family entertainment. Don't confuse it with sports. And then a stadium properly designed is a performance venue for concerts and shows, just like you described. It's also your anchor point for fairs and festivals. You open the gate, you have restrooms for 5,000 people. think about staging a 5K race at the plaza of the stadium and having food, beverage, first aid, and restrooms for all your participants, just by opening the gate. So, it's in the A&E district, so any performance in that district is subjected to the tax breaks that the A&E district brings to performers. So imagine trying to bring into Hagerstown a big national act, and when their promoter and manager look at it, they go like, we don't have to pay any taxes on this? State taxes, you don't have to pay state taxes on this performance. You move it outside the A&E district, you don't get that. You move it outside the opportunity zone, you put Delegate Quarterman in a hard situation getting that state's third. That's, I think that the downtown site just complements the education hub and the A&E theme.
When you talk about other than baseball, and let's talk about other than minor league baseball, because minor league baseball would be the anchor tenant that pays
Right.
the majority
Pays the majority
of the
of bills.
cost. That's what minor league baseball would be. You got Dr. Clower, who was here, and I see he's gone now. Scott Jennings coaches the Hagerstown Community College baseball team. I've had conversations with him. To be totally upfront, we're childhood friends, all right, so we can talk plainly to each other. They play 13 home games a year. They would play 13 home games at this new facility. You have, people talk about girls softball tournaments. They're pretty big, they're pretty huge, all right? So you put a girls softball tournament that can go on over to fairgrounds and then have the championship game downtown, huge, huge. You would bring the South Atlantic League All-Star game to Hagerstown, Maryland. Something we've never had and have never hosted. And those are teams from all over the South American, or South Atlantic League. So there's, besides just minor league baseball games, there's another 50 sports venues that can be played at that facility to enhance what happens there now. Then you add on those extra 100 events, whatever they are. And you have people in the core of the downtown of Hagerstown constantly walking through. Just imagine the setup that we have right now with the restaurants that we have and, well, restaurants that we have. Imagine an extra 1,000 people 7 nights in a row. What that would do just for those restaurants, just 1,000. 1,000 that we don't get now. I see this differently, and I know that, Christine can talk about, things about the lease from 2012. Just so you know, we never did finalize the lease in 2012. We could never get together to make that happen. Lou knows all the many meetings that we had about a lease, all right? But a 30-year lease signed by a minor league baseball team is huge. 30 years is huge, because now you're guaranteed to have a minor league baseball team in that facility for 30 years. It may not be the Suns. It may not be a Nationals affiliate, it may be another affiliate, but the point is you will always have a minor league baseball team in that facility for 30 years, guaranteed, to follow that lease that was agreed to, let's just say a year from now. So, you always have it. All right. Anybody else have anything else to wrap this up? Because we got to keep moving. It's 5:40 now. Spent an hour and 40 minutes on an hour meeting. Everybody knows how much I love that.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
We're available to reach out to anytime.
All right, great. So I need to get a motion to go into the 74 special session, please.
So moved.
Get a second?
Second.
Lou and Shelley, discussion? All in favor? Apparently that's aye, okay. Approval of improvements to Wheaton Park.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the approval of $32,940 in community development block grant funds for improvements at Wheaton Park as follows. Purchase of 4 True Bounce basketball poles, backboards, and trims. Sports court coating of main basketball court, mural and mid-court circle, and three-point areas. Authorize staff to complete these improvements to support the Ruth Ann Monroe Summer Basketball League and enhance the aesthetics of the park.
Second.
Shelley gets that. Discussion.
I just want to recognize Ebony Williams in the audience. Worked very hard to bring this to our attention, and I again applaud you and Rodney and all the folks that helped you get to here. I really look forward to watching some basketball. I mean, I probably won't know what's going on, but I will watch it. So congratulations. I'm excited that we get to do this.
It's pathetic.
What? I don't
That's too
know.
done.
It's very squeaky. It's very squeaky.
That's only on a hardwood floor.
Well,
Oh, my
whatever.
goodness. All right, any other discussion? I mean, can you teach her something, please?
No, you can.
All in favor? Yeah, go ahead,
Can I
Scott.
just, I know you all are going to approve this, but I just want to mention what Ebony, what her staff is doing for kids in this area. I'm close with one of their, I guess you want to call him a client, Sleepy Burnett, and the amount of work that these kids have put in with Sleepy. Catrice Dixon, who I love like a daughter, that's on your staff, that what you have done with not only the athletic side of things, but with helping kids and mentoring these kids is fantastic. And I applaud you all for that. And I love what you're going to do with the programs at Wheaton Park. I'll be down there also. But what you're doing with just generally with athletes and how you're making them better people and not just better athletes, I can't applaud you enough for that. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of a purchase of new portable radio package for Hagerstown Police Department. Rodney, please don't leave. I have to talk to you before you leave.
Yeah, it's tough.
Nice try.
I hereby move for mayor and council approval to purchase a new portable radio package for the Hagerstown Police Department. The radio package will be used to replace HPD's aging radio system and will be purchased from Tactical Public Safety LLC via Washington County Wireless Communications. Total cost for the purchase would be $420,037.65. Tactical Public Safety LLC was awarded Washington County's competitively bid contract number INTG-18-005. Funding will be from a 2019 bond issue.
Second.
Second?
Yes.
Lou did.
Lou, okay. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of purchase of 2019 police uniforms.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and council approval of the purchase of police uniforms. These uniforms will be purchased from Howard Uniforms, Baltimore, Maryland, for a total of $44,137.88. Howard Uniform won the competitively bid City of Baltimore Department of Transportation contract number B50004657. Funding will be from HPD's uniform account.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Ratification of emergency procurement, emergency demolition of 57-61 East Antietam Street Garage, Hagerstown, Maryland. Make sure that we want to do this, please, before we read the motion.
Mr. Mayor, we move for the ratification of an emergency procurement for demolition of 5761 East Antietam Street Garage. The garage is in a state of progressive structural collapse and was deemed to be unstable by a professional engineer. Staff ordered the demolition of the structure to eliminate the threat to public safety. Allegheny Wrecking and Salvage of Hagerstown, Maryland completed the demolition work. The cost of demolition work performed by Allegheny Wrecking and Salvage was $16,000. The work performed at this property will be paid from the property abatement account.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. City Administrator.
Just a couple of things, Mayor, I'll be quick. This is our first weekend coming up for Imagine Hagerstown. Just want to remind everybody, Friday night at the University Plaza, the Get Right Band will be playing 6:30 to 9. The fund moves to the Cultural Trail on Saturday with a full slate of activities from noon until 5. Go to imaginehagerstown.org for more information, but it really looks, it's shaping up to be not only a nice weekend weather-wise, but also a very fun weekend to get out and walk around downtown and experience the activities. Also, Fairground Stable Community Yard Sale, 7 o'clock to 2 o'clock on Saturday at the stables. A ton of vendors out there that love to have your business. Thank you, Mayor.
Shelley.
Saturday, or Friday night, I had the privilege of going to Thunder in the Square and selecting the mayor's choice of the best car, although it was a little controversial because I picked a Corvette, and apparently it's a Chevy, and that was like right, what?
Should have been a Ford.
Well, it was the mayor's choice, why would I pick a Ford? So it was so neat because it was just the definition of community. There were so many people out and the restaurants were packed. It was really amazing. So that was the first opportunity I got to do that, and I applaud Doug, the brainchild of that Thunder in the Square. It was really nice. So thank you for allowing me to do that. I appreciate it.
Glad you had fun.
Yes, it was.
Luke?
Nothing, Mayor, thank you.
Austin?
Just wanted to say, I hope we all keep in our forefront of our mind what happened just recently down in Virginia Beach. I saw, Scott, you were going to start working toward looking at the safety of our employees here in the city, and I think that's something between you and the chief. I really think we've hit a point in time in our country now where something's going to happen at some point in time, and we need to be ready for it. So I applaud you for taking the initiative and doing that.
Crystal?
I'm done.
So get out this weekend, enjoy the beginning of Imagine Hagerstown, Friday and Saturday, and enjoy yourselves and have fun. We will unfortunately have to meet next Tuesday, 3 council members and myself, to at least go over the preliminary agenda. We'll keep it very short, so we'll be in and out. And then we'll have our regular meeting on the 18th. So, thank you, guys.
Thanks.
We're adjourned.